I feel like I ask this question every year when I come to MicroConf from the stage, but I'll ask it again one more time. Why do we come out to MicroConf? Why do we come out to Las Vegas? I can't imagine it's for the things that typically bring people to Las Vegas. Usually it's like, drinking and debauchery. This year I participated in MicroConf's first, hopefully, annual D&D session, like Dungeons and Dragons. My paladin ate it 15 minutes or so into the session, and it was a paladin, neutral good halfling paladin consecrated to the goddess of luck, died in 15 minutes, so that means poker should probably be off the menu for me for this year. But why come to MicroConf? It's because I think we are a community of practice, and community in a few senses of the word. We have a common set of aspirations, roughly common set of values, and also, like most communities of practice, we have a set of techniques that kind of works for us. We've been developing the technology of running MicroConf scale software businesses over the last, 8 years now. And the community changes a little bit every year. Some new people join, some people presumably leave, although most of the folks that I remember from having talks back in the day, I seem to run into them every year. But I think, like all communities, we're going through some of the challenges of success, some of the challenges of growth, just like our individual companies are in some cases having some of the challenges of success and the challenges of growth. So I'd like to talk a little bit about them. And I'd like to bring in a little bit of the technology of managing growth from the growth experts, which is Silicon Valley. And I think a recurring theme for myself in life is I find myself playing the role of an ambassador. I've lived my entire adult life in Japan, and as you can see, I'm not exactly the standard model. I built my business on being the one engineer that understood marketing or the one marketer who understood engineering. And then my self-conception is as an entrepreneur, but I definitely have a day job these days. And I bootstrapped 2 businesses, but I now work for a high-growth tech startup. And I think sometimes we in the community over the years have been overly defined by what we're not. We're doing this bootstrapping thing, which is totally not what those Silicon Valley folks are doing. And I think we've often been a little bit, let's say, overly critical of what they're doing. And this is not just me talking the book. I've actually felt like I learned a heck of a lot over the last 2.5 years there. And so I thought I would bring in some of the stuff that is relevant to our interests as we're scaling businesses. Silicon Valley does, and this is just my personal opinion, 2 things really right, better than basically anywhere else in the world. And they're intrinsically tied together. The first thing is that Silicon Valley is willing to put money. Can we adjust the timer to actually time? Thanks. Silicon Valley is willing to put money into experiments trying to figure out what humans want. And they're willing to fund thousands of tiny experiments in parallel in the knowledge that almost all of the experiments will fail. And there's almost no organization in the rest of the world that is willing to accept a 1% hit rate for experiments. Universities won't back that, funding bodies won't back that. Silicon Valley will back that all day long because of the second thing that Silicon Valley does very well. If an experiment works in Silicon Valley, then they'll say, that's interesting. We're going to deploy that worldwide within 7 years. And whatever the obstacle is to getting it deployed worldwide in 7 years, we'll solve that. So a normal person, if you hear, we're going to need $800 million to take some technology and get it in the hands of 1 million people scattered across 7 continents, would say, $800 million is an unachievably large amount of money. Silicon Valley institutionally says, what I'm hearing is you have 800 million entirely solvable problems. If you hit your metrics in the middle of this, we can find some combination of people that will happily back that business. And one of the things that Silicon Valley does, in addition to providing capital, is providing experts this sort of thing. Because 7 years is not all that long of time. And there are people who have watched companies repeatedly over the course of the years go from 100 people at the end of year 2 to thousands of people just a short number of years later. And those executives specialize in building the organizations that take a company from 100 people to thousands or tens of thousands of people. And I really think that there is something that they are very good at that we can learn from. And so I would love to share some of those things that I've seen from folks who are really good at operating this sort of thing. Scaling past yourself. How many folks here are currently in a phase where you are running up into like scaling challenges with the number of people in the business? Either you're bringing on your first employees or you are expanding the team because, oh my goodness, if we don't expand the team, we're going to die. Lots of hands? Cool. I'll say something, and it's a little bit self-indulgent, but I want to give you a concrete example of a tactic that works for scaling yourself. I'm going to give people advice later on how to price their software. What advice am I going to give? Just shout it out. Great. This might be the most effective thing that I've ever done in my career. I turned that into a meme, and now people in rooms that I'm not in, when they're talking about pricing, will say, you know, if Patio11 was in this room, he'd tell us to charge more. Maybe we should do that, which means as a consultant telling people to charge more, I am infinitely effective because for zero marginal effort, like conversations happen. They actually proposed at work that they would like make a chatbot to be able to consult me on pricing things. So someone would like put in a number and the chatbot would put in a bigger number. And I'm happy to be a live version of that chatbot for you later or anytime you want. But like the fact that that was a serious thing, serious proposal is one thing. And then we didn't implement it because people thought it was a joke. And I'm like, I will literally implement that because it's going to work so well. Anyhow, scaling past yourself is largely about creating processes and cultures that will cause the things that you do well to happen when you're not around to do those things well. And I want to give you some specific examples of ways that I've seen that work out. But before I do, my annual plug. Pricing advice, seriously, almost none of you are charging enough. We're probably not charging enough. Nobody is charging enough in software. Maybe Oracle. For those of you that already have teams, you're probably having meetings with your teams, and you're talking about the business. And across the industry, I think that these things are getting short shrift in your meetings, and so I just want to call a couple of them out. One is the actual words of customers. I really loved the talk that we had the other day on this. There is nothing like people's actual words to help drive product development, help drive solving your problems. Figure out systems and processes like discussed in the other talks to bring those into your actual decision-making processes. You will almost never go wrong by having more people directly exposed to your customers. And in places where it's tough to be directly exposed to your customers, for having the folks who are directly exposed to the customers, bringing the insights from them directly into the decision-making process and tightening that loop. I was talking, so a major portion of my job these days is, playing the Patio11 character on the internet is one part. Another portion is helping companies that are growing really quickly. And the CEO at one of them, a company that is doing quite well, said that they know what they would do if they were doing the job of everybody in the company. But they can't do the job of everybody in the company. How do you cause other people to do the job and do the best possible version of the job? And I said that what you should do is you should keep an eye on the people who are doing the work day to day. And when you see things that work out extraordinarily well, you want to highlight for the rest of the company particular things that worked out extraordinarily well. And often these are stuff that happens at the absolute lowest levels of the company in terms of like org chart levels. You know, have an org chart these days. That's weird for a solo founder. It used to just be an org dot. Anyhow, find the folks and say, hey, Cindy's work on this project was outstanding, everybody. Why was that outstanding? Because then use the fact that as a founder, you probably have a holistic view of the business. Well, it does this and this and this for the business, and it is an instantiation of the values that we care about. Cindy did great work here. And if you repeat that process a lot, people will start to replicate the things that you call out as exemplars of the company culture. And that is how cultures are created, like one conversation at a time, one active mimicry at a time, one like tiny little brick in the wall at a time. And this is another thing. you can't repeat certain things too often. Like I can't repeat too often that you should charge more because you should. You can't repeat the mission of the company too often, partly because as you are ingesting people into the company, there will be some folks that just haven't heard it yet. If you've ever seen that XKCD cartoon that like 10,000 people on the internet see that like cool thing on the internet for the first time every day, and so you should never assume that everyone has already seen that cool thing that is on the internet because some folks haven't seen it yet. You should always assume if you are hiring actively that some people won't have 100% of the context that you do since you've been there since the beginning. And so you should feel free to beat your important messages like a drum. And one of those important messages is, what is this company really about? Like, what is our core objective? So at Stripe, for example, the core objective is we want to increase the GDP of the internet. And that gets repeated on a weekly basis. And it's funny because folks who followed Stripe for years, like myself before I joined there, the first time I heard it was I was talking to the other Patrick, and the other Patrick said, "Oh yeah, we're here to increase the GDP of the internet." I'm like, "Oh man, that is amazing." And he's like, "Wait, you never heard that phrase before? We've been saying it for years." I'm like, "No, I've fed my family out of a Stripe account for 5 years, and I'd never heard that." And there are people who work at your companies who might have worked there for a long time, who don't have the context on the company lore, et cetera, the various reasons why you do what you do the way you do. And so you should feel free to repeat those more often than feels natural. This is also a thing that happens in teaching. You don't just say C-A-T, cat, because cat, C makes a sound, K sound. It's been a while since I've been an elementary school teacher. It takes a while to sink in at all levels. A discipline that we do at Stripe and that is done at some companies that I think are really, really impressive, Berkshire Hathaway, et cetera, and also some companies that are not quite as impressive, Bingo Card Creator, is to write an annual shareholder letter. This is a letter addressed to yourself and to your employees. And if your employees aren't technically shareholders, then call it the annual stakeholder letter, whatever works for you. And I'd encourage you to spend one day on this every year, probably early in the year, and just take some time, break out of the normal flow of operating the business and say, okay, what just happened last year? What was important about that? This is partly a quantitative assessment. You should definitely have your top line important metrics for your business in there, whether that is revenue, customers, churn rate, et cetera, et cetera. You all know what the metrics are. So put those in one place so that you can find them in later years. And also write a just prose assessment of how the year went. What were the important things that happened? What are you very proud that the team shipped? What are your thoughts, your hopes, your fears for this coming year? And why do you write this? The nature of living is that we're all writing history in real time, but if you don't actually write it down, it's very easy to forget. And so if you can create the history for your business in real time, you'll be producing a set of records that when your business inevitably gets to the point where people don't exactly remember what happened earlier, the folks that are here now weren't there to see it in real time. You've added new folks to the team. Memories are fallible. You'll be able to say, oh yeah, that really did happen. And this helps really concentrate the thinking and brings you back to the things that really matter systemically in your business. Whether that's, for example, your company's unique values or things that it is really easy to understand that the fundamental equation of SaaS matters a heck of a lot for every SaaS business. And it is really hard on any given Tuesday to peek your head up above the email inbox and the ongoing contract negotiations and the 15 tickets in Jira and say, actually, wait, the health of this business is fundamentally dominated by the fundamental equation of SaaS. So let's make sure that we know where those numbers are and that they're moving up and to the right. So make the space for that. Here's a thing that is unreasonably effective. In our industry particularly, but also the case in most fields of human endeavor, virtually everyone who is really, really good at whatever it is that is important to your business is on the same internet that you are with a working email address and doesn't have nearly enough people attempting to talk to them today about the thing that they have devoted their professional life to. And so if you are ever trying to do something for the first time, maybe you're writing your first AdWords campaign, You can write an email to someone who has done a whole lot more than one AdWords campaign and say, hey, I'm writing my first AdWords campaign for an enterprise software company. I wanted to talk to you about some ideas I had. Here are my ideas, ABC, what do you think? And odds are you get a very high quality conversation out of that. And this is something that comes naturally to some founders, not all of us. Many of us were the shy engineering types, but business-oriented founders are often very comfortable with saying, oh yeah, I can work my network to find the best person in X and ask at the start of a new project all about the Xing. Employees typically are very uncomfortable with this, but it is a really, really good discipline to get into, because then you can, I like to think that projects have a mistake budget, and you want to spend your mistake budget on new, interesting mistakes, rather than re-implementing somebody else's mistakes that they would be happy to tell you about. There's actually someone who sent me an email recently. He was attempting to get a job at a particular company, and the company had sent him a written question, an assessment like, write your plan for doing blah. And the thing that they asked for a plan about was on a thing that I'm actually kind of decent at. And he said, hey, Patrick, I'm attempting to get a job at this company. They have asked me to write a X-page proposal with regards to this question. If you were asked that, what would you write? And I said, oh, wow. Asking me to do your homework is totally cool in capitalism, isn't it? Like, if you can convince me to actually write that answer, you're ipso facto good at your job. And so I told him, I like geeking out about this stuff. Here's my answer to this. And then he replied back with, OK, I incorporated it here, blah, blah, blah. Fingers crossed, I think he's probably going to get that job. Or I'm dooming them, who knows. Anyhow, this is a thing to tell your teams when you're starting a project, particularly a project that breaks new grounds for you. Find the people who are the experts. If you don't know who are the experts, tap your MicroConf friends and say, hey, I'm working in lifecycle email marketing, or et cetera, for the first time. Who do you trust on the topic of lifecycle email marketing? I think that you are probably not more than 1 or 2 hops in the MicroConf community from people who are legitimately among the best in the world at the tiny slices of human reality that are really relevant to our software businesses. I get to see the insides of a lot of startups as a function of talking to a lot of people and working with a lot of startups at my day job, and also being inside of a day job. And there are some areas that typically tend to be underinvested in, even knowing that we underinvest in them. And so I want to run through some of them just to say, hey, whatever you're doing on these, maybe you should be doing 10 times as much as you're doing right now. And this is true virtually across the board. So content marketing is a word I absolutely hate. But when you think of defensible forms of marketing that aren't going to go out of style, so Rob was talking the other day about all tactics have a season, and sometimes, when I started Bingo Card Creator back in the day, AdWords clicks were 5 cents a piece, and that was a wonderful, wonderful time to be alive. And there's very little that you can get from AdWords clicks for 5 cents a piece these days. But content marketing is just, if you teach things to people, then they will learn things from you. It never goes out of style. It is, the demand for it is virtually infinite, because there are, if you think of yourself, are there things that you do not know that you wish to know? That is probably the case. Therefore, you are still in the target market for content marketing, and you always will be, no matter how much you learn to know. And so there is basically, I have been unable to find a margin at which investing more into producing excellent material ceases to work for a business. And we have, so we're trying to explore those margins, and I think we are probably not within orders of magnitude of where the efficient frontier is on this kind of thing. Another one is email. I built a few of my software businesses on top of email. I implemented email as basically my stock consulting engagement with B2B SaaS companies for several years. I've done quite a bit of email professionally in the last 2 years. Virtually nobody sends enough email. And the ones that do, you know it. I won't shame any large LinkedIn sort of companies on stage. Oops. But Like, we don't send enough. And someone was tweeting with me earlier today. He's like, I don't know, I try to send email, but I feel like people are just, they're emailed out. And my answer to that is that, well, people don't seem to be Englished out because they wake up every morning and they still want to consume English that day. And so if you figure out the right English that they would want to consume in a day, then you just deliver that English over email and you're golden. And I know that isn't maximally actionable, like learn to become a good writer who solves problems for people and then solve problems for people by writing for them, is like not something that can be, trivially like snap your fingers on any given Tuesday. That's part of what makes it super defensible. Even companies that devote like lots and lots of resources into this are sort of unable to make the magic happen on demand. And so if you really understand what your customers need, if you really understand their desires, if you are good at the craft of writing or can hire someone that is good at the craft of writing, there are few margins at which sending more email will not get you more of what you want. Systematization of sales processes. Who here feels like they have a totally dialed-in sales process from A to Z? You know everything that happens to get someone in from the front door to the point where they are happily paying your company for years? Nobody. Okay. There exists at least some companies in the world that feel like they've got it on total lock, and they might. But in our community, this largely is not the case. And even small tweaks at the margin, like doing a retrospective on that deal that you won that worked out pretty well for you, and saying, okay, what did we do to get the lead? What was our first conversation with them like? Let's write down what we actually said. What were their objections? How did we get over them? Let's write that down. And then let's try to repeat more of that next time and make this like something that is less, you trying to just extemporize in real time, and more of, no, we're starting to write a script. We're starting to just repeat the script. We are making edits to the script rather than attempting to be our smartest selves every time. Like, you wouldn't have your web app function by, okay, I'm just going to like open a REPL and service requests manually by typing really, really fast because I'm a genius. Every time a web request comes in, you probably shouldn't be handling sales that way. And another one, and one that you will get super amounts of value from if you talk to other people at MicroConf, is internal tools. Relative to most businesses in the world, we have a superpower, which is that we can write code that works on demand, which companies find really, really hard to do, even for companies that you would expect to have infinite amounts of money to throw at this problem. Ask your fellow attendees at MicroConf, what does your dashboard look like? What does your admin page look like? What software have you written to run your software business better? Just ask like 5 people this question. I will guarantee you will have a hit palm to forehead moment. I won't do that or it'll knock out the microphone. Palm to forehead moment on, oh man, we could implement that like in a day and it would be amazing for our business. So do that. I think the community is starting to hit some of the challenges of success. So those of us that were on the first, let's say those of us who were at MicroConf 2011, we've all had a very eventful 8 years. And sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're sad, but in the main, the people that have run a business for the last 8 years had a pretty good time of it. And some of us are on our second, third, fourth, et cetera acts. And there's a big question of what happens next. There's kind of a tradition at MicroConf of responding to themes that were brought up in other talks. So someone asked, why are so many people who had previously run software businesses now running or investing in or et cetera, structures in the ecosystem around software businesses? And so I have a personal reflection on this, and it's brought to you by the musical Hamilton, which I haven't seen. So I'm not exactly sure what it's about. It's apparently a rap musical about an enterprise software engagement. Okay, maybe it's not about that. But they literally do have a song that is about contract negotiation, right? It's, how does it go? Nobody who knows how the parties get to yes, the pieces that get sacrificed in every game of chess. That's definitely a contract negotiation. The name of the song is The Room Where It Happens, and the theme of the the song is that people want to be in the room where it happens. And I think entrepreneurs realize after you've done this for a few years that our careers are long but finite. And so in the course of one's long but finite career, you get maybe like 5 to 10 chances at running a software business. But most of us who really, really love the art and craft of running software businesses have many, many more businesses that we want to be involved in than the 5 to 10 that we will actually get to see before we retire. And so I think one of the reasons that people come back to MicroConf, stay involved in the community, attempt to become investors, et cetera, is so that they get to be in the room where it happens when someone else is running an amazing software business and getting it from the stage that is most intellectually motivating to them. So that's my tiny personal reflection on this. And I bet if you were to talk to other people, you'd hear reflections on it as well. I have a boss these days, and that feels kind of weird, and I love him. He said, hey, we're going to do a performance review. And this is two and a half years ago when I started, he said, now I know people get worried about a performance review, but I'm going to make this as easy as possible, and don't worry, I won't say anything to hurt your feelings. And I said, Taylor, for the last 10 years, my performance reviews have been delivered by capitalism. There is no way that you're going to be harsher than that. But in the context of that whole career-oriented conversation, he asked me a question that I have never been asked before, and I think about this all the time now. Forget the current projects you're working on. Forget this job. Zoom way back. Over the long arc of your career, which is going to last 40, 45-something years, what do you want to accomplish? What do you expect to be true? And I think that is a deep thought question. And I think you should probably, if you're like me, spend more time thinking about it than you have previously. So I feel like I'm 15 years into this career. And I was thinking, oh man, 15 years, it's been a while. And when I'm asked that question, I reflect, oh well, wow, most of it is still ahead of me. What do I want to get accomplished in the next 30 years of it? And I'll share my reflection with you. I picked a metric to optimize for. And here it is. I think the story of my first 15 years was finding the community that I wanted to serve. And that is basically you guys. I am happiest and most fulfilled when I'm working on behalf of software people, broadly defined. So software entrepreneurs, engineers, et cetera, I get them the best, I have the best conversations. When I build products for them, they are much better than the products I build for other people. This feels like what I was meant to do. And then, okay, if I found that as my community, what do I hope to accomplish for that community? And I think my answer on that is a little bit squishier, but it's basically impact their lives as much positively as possible. So my metric is take the number of people that I have touched and multiply by, let's say, the median impact. And then that's my score. Just optimize for things that improve that score. Subject to the usual constraints of, and I want to have a little bit of fun doing this, and I want to see my family. And that's been very clarifying about both some of the projects that I undertake on a quarter-to-quarter basis and also what I'm optimizing for over the course of the next few years of my life. So I think maybe running that same exercise for yourself would be interesting as well. And when I think of that exercise, I think there's some open questions that we have here as a community to puzzle through. And so I'd encourage you to puzzle through these things as well. One of my beliefs for the last couple of years has been, so there exists the set of people who come to MicroConf. And there exist many people who say there couldn't possibly be as many MicroConf-shaped businesses in the world as actually come to MicroConf. Clearly that's false. We can see the evidence around us that it's false. One of my beliefs about the world is that there are probably 100 businesses kind of shaped like MicroConf that exist in the world for every person in this room. And so I think an open question is, how do we get those people into the community? Either by actually bringing them out to the events or by somehow packaging the ethos that is MicroConf, the technologies that we figured out, our way of being, and getting it to them so that it can be helpful for them. I think one of the questions is that, especially for those of us who have been doing this for a few years, We're at a different stage in our career right now than we were that first day that we started X number of years ago. But there are people that are much closer to where we started than we are currently. And some of them will be at Starter tomorrow. So I'd encourage you to spend some time with the folks at the get-together tonight. Make some new friends. Tell them that this is possible and that, sure, there are ups and downs in the business, but this is actually achievable. Regular mortals like them did this. I'm as much a regular mortal as everyone else. I was terrified the first time I sold bingo cards to elementary school teachers for $24.95. And I've done a few things since then. And I think that will be the narrative for most of the people that actually get something into the market and try to grow it for a few years. And so I want us to be maximally supportive of that. And I think answering my earlier question about why do I come to Vegas, it's because this community is the one that is maximally supportive of folks that are just starting out at all the later stages of their journey. So I'm employed by Stripe these days. My email address is patio11@stripe.com. Somebody else had gotten the patrick@stripe.com email address. He would also happily take email from you. That plays like a joke, but actually serious. If you ever have a problem with Stripe, please, please, please let us know. We will fix it. Like if MicroConf isn't having an awesome experience with our products, something has gone systemically wrong. My personal email address is up there as well. And if any of you are looking to do something entirely different over the next couple of years and work on building products which are very, very relevant to this community and solve real problems for entrepreneurs worldwide, we'd be happy to have that conversation too, or if you know anybody. So stripe.com/jobs, or send them directly to me. I'm happy to route them to the best person internally. Anyhow, thank you very much for coming today.